You are with me at Truckee Meadows Community College studying world religions, and glad you're aboard, and I'm looking forward to our broadcast today and figuring out where we go from here, folks. We have, today we want to discuss the remainder of your Buddhism reading, and I want to say just a few words really about your analysis response assignments and your expectations going forward for those. And but I wanted to first of all just give you, hang on a second, let me just get my hands free here. A round of applause, really, because the quizzes have been amazingly good overall. I'm not an easy quiz master, quiz maker, and that you are doing so well on these speaks very, very highly of how well you're doing these readings. So I just wanted to give you kudos for your performance overall on these quizzes. It's looking really good. I think actually over both sections the average was 83 or 85%, which is outstanding. So that's good. I promise I won't intentionally make them harder, but it's a matter of sustaining the kind of effort that you're putting into the class so far that will make you successful going forward. So anyway, keep it up. I guess that's what I have to say. Number next is the analysis response assignments. So you're probably eager to get those back and ready to plunge ahead on to do those for your Buddhism readings. So just to give you a reminder about that, I've been going through them, and overall, I mean, you guys are clearly getting it. There are a couple of the elements in the model that I don't think have quite sunk in for many of you, but hey, it's all fixable. As I said last time, the way I evaluate you here on the first analysis response assignment is going to reflect that this is kind of a new thing. It's not like any kind of assignment that you've had to do before, and I recognize that, and I'm going to make sure that I reinforce what you're doing well on them, and then try to give you some guidance for improving the areas that you can, so that then going forward you're gonna have this thing mastered after 2 or 3 of them, and it'll be gravy going forward for you. So analysis response assignments. So you should be looking for those coming back. Probably starting tomorrow is when I'll start sending them back, and then you can use that and start on the Buddhism. Now the Buddhism analysis response assignment isn't due until a week from Sunday, right? So we're talking. I'm not even going to try to do this because I'll get it wrong. It's on your syllabus. So this week you're finishing up the Buddhism reading in the Houston Smith book. Next week you'll have the Buddhism readings, the scriptures from the collection in your other book and the Philip Novak book. And then, that's when the week you'll be doing the Buddhism analysis response assignment. Okay, so hopefully that wasn't too confusing. All right, gang. So here, let's talk briefly then about the remainder of your reading in Buddhism, and I want to give you some heads up on things to look for in the quiz. And so let me just duck over here real quick and grab this book again. All right. Now on the assigned reading, I gave you starting at Big Raft, Little Raft. So this is where Houston Smith is going to be talking about the varieties of Buddhism that have emerged historically. So Theravada and Mahayana Buddhism are, I didn't say that right, I'll get back to it later, but the two main branches of Buddhism are where your reading picks up this week. And what I want you to do, however, for the quiz is I want you to go back to the previous section. So this is the basic Buddhist Concepts section starting on page 112. All right, and I want you to review that section because I do want to, or I have put some questions that address the basic Buddhist concepts that we did not cover on the last quiz. Now, that mainly comes down to Nirvana. Nirvana we did talk about on the last quiz, and you still need to understand what that is for this reading too. But what I want you to do is look in this section again at the concepts we did not have on the last quiz. And so those will be the anatta doctrine. They will be the anicca doctrine. So anatta is the no soul doctrine. Then you'll want to know about the, let's see, where is it? Didn't I say anicca? Yeah, the anicca doctrine, which is the transitoriness of life, the impermanence of things. That doctrine is on a couple questions in your quiz. And let me see, what was the last one? There were three. And then know what an arhat is. Okay, that's the stage. So what is the ideal life of the arhat? And those are then appearing on your quiz this week. So let me see if there was anything else I wanted to point out to you. Yeah. So I'm trying to remember if I put another Nirvana question. It wouldn't hurt to review the Nirvana question. It is a tricky concept. It's really easy to only have a superficial grasp of it. And part of that is because it is very difficult to express in language. But what Nirvana is not like a heaven, in the monotheistic traditions of the West. It's not that. Is it a state of enlightenment? Sure, insofar as you can call it a state at all. But it is, if you remember your last quiz, your Nirvana question asked you, hey, what's the best English translation for this? I gave you a list of them, and the best one was to extinguish. So that means to snuff out or to put out, and that has a negative connotation. But what it means is to extinguish samsara, that cycle of life and rebirth, to be able to transcend. Then Nirvana is transcending that state in which we are beset with suffering as a result of our craving to satisfy our own desires. And so the final extinguishing of desire, of those kinds of desires, is then the ways or the path toward extinguishing then the self, because it's this self that is constructed around those desires and that pin us to this world and then generate all the suffering that we experience. Okay, so that's Nirvana. I don't know why I went off on that. But anyway, just be sure that you look at those central doctrines that are discussed in that section, page 112 to 119. Okay, now what I want to talk about is just briefly run through with you, and I'll be looking down, so it's kind of awkward, I realize. But I'm going to look down and just highlight a couple things that I think you should pay attention to. So the sort of bigger picture here is to make sure that you understand, like if you're a chart kind of person, you could draw up a chart that says, okay, here are the different schools of Buddhism, and then here are what their distinct teachings are. And you could make a grid that lays those things out. That kind of thing would be actually quite helpful for you as a study tool for this week. And that is the central part. That's the main thing that's going on here, is your author describing the different schools in Buddhism, a little bit of why they arose, but more attention is focused on to what makes them distinct from each other. So how, in other words, and so all of this would have to have some root that goes back to Gautama, Siddhartha Gautama, who is recognized by all of the schools as the founder of their particular sect. And so they all then will have different emphases in what Gautama taught, and then express that in their own teachings and in their own practices in ways that sort of select out some of the, or sometimes they are interpretations of those original texts around the Buddha himself, and some of them are developments from those texts where they sort of extend it by a logic. Anyway, that's what you want to pay attention to then, is the schools and what their distinctive teachings are, where they overlap, if at all, and that would be the most helpful way to sort of organize your reading for this week. Okay, so just a couple of the major distinguishing things, a couple of the major points to pick up from this reading that will help you on the quiz is the questions that he mentions on pages 120 to 121. Is this is something that is going to be useful to you, not only in this reading, but to understand why any of the religions, as they mature and as they expand, why they break off into different sects that sometimes violently, but in any event, they somehow are trying to express what they understand to be the essential part of the religion, or the true expression of that religion. Why does that happen? And it comes down to some very human kinds of questions. Big questions, but still human questions. And these are very helpful to keep in mind for your reading today, as well as going forward. Okay, so there's the question of whether people are independent units or whether they're interdependent. In other words, whether we are these individual monads, or whether we are ultimately social, whether that's the most important thing. And so you'll see then divisions occurring over how you answer that question. And the thing about mature religions is they will often give you reasons to ascribe to one of the ideas or the other. So it's not that there's a clear affirmation of one answer and the other is completely rejected. No, rather, there are different degrees of affirmation. And it's contextualized, it's relativized to some extent. And part of the challenge then for a participant in a mature religion is to sort of navigate these kinds of questions and know when it's important to live independently, and when it's important and how it's important to also recognize how you are interdependent. Okay, so what you have then are sects that will divide over this question. The next question is the universe friendly or hostile? I like to phrase this a slightly different way. I like to ask the question, what is the central ordering principle of the universe? Now, that assumes something. That assumes that the universe is not absurd. In other words, that it is not meaningless. Of course, religions all will say that there is meaning to the universe. So the question is, is that meaning something that is ultimately going to be something we can plug into in a helpful way, or is that meaning going to be hostile to us and is something that we have to overcome or fight? Okay, so a lot of people will ask, is this universe then ultimately friendly to us, or is it ultimately hostile? Are we going to be living a life of striving and struggle for the most part, or are we going to be living in relative peace and tranquility? Okay, so that's the big question. Number 2 is, what's the default condition of the universe? And so you can ask, what is the central ordering principle? Is it something like competition, or is it something like love? Okay, so there is your question number 2. Question number 3 then is, what is the best part of the human self? Is it the head or the heart? Is it best to order one's life and evaluate one's life and hold oneself to standards that have to do with the head, in other words, reason, or with the heart, or with emotion? And that is a very common division within religions. Heck, even within any particular community within a sect, you will find this division amongst the people, and that is people who are who think that say the seeking of wisdom is the highest aim that we should strive for, or people who would say no, pursuing compassion is the highest thing that we should be pursuing. Okay, so those create conflict because you can't say that the highest thing is both. You have to be able to navigate that or make a choice about it. And so you have schools that will express one or the other, or valorize or emphasize one or the other. Okay, so that's the dividing questions. You know, and that's the part where he does talk about the grounds for dividing. So Theravada Buddhism then answers these questions in a particular way. On the last question, it pretty clearly answers that it's the seeking of wisdom, that the most important part of the human self is the head, if you want to put it that way. And that the universe is basically hostile. There is no help coming from the unseen order of things. And so you're on your own, buddy, and you've got to work out your own salvation with diligence. That's a direct quote from the Buddha. And so they sort of make that their primary claim, ordering claim. Okay, so Theravada Buddhism seeks, first of all and most of all, enlightenment and wisdom. So make sure you look at that and understand the implications of that. Okay, let me see if I can find where if there was something else in that section. No. Okay. Mahayana Buddhism is sort of the opposite then. It is the one that says, no, the universe is actually a friendly place and there is grace. Grace is infused throughout the universe in order to help us, to assist us, to help us transform into our Buddha nature. And that then the way in which this is done is through a life of compassion. Okay, so look at the specific teachings then of Mahayana Buddhism, and also make sure that you examine which countries are Theravada, which are Mahayana. You'll want to make sure that you get that also from your reading, because I do have a question about there. Okay, so there are then within Mahayana Buddhism, then there are divisions also, and so there are additional sects, and this is where we have the discussion about Zen Buddhism. And there's a lot that the author says about Zen Buddhism, because he himself was an initiate or disciple of Zen Buddhism at one time, and so he has a lot of good description there of the specific teachings of Zen, which is probably the most popular form of Buddhism in the West. Then there are a couple other. There's the Pure Land sect also. And then there is Tibetan Buddhism. And the leader of Tibetan Buddhism is someone that is known worldwide. He's almost a pop culture icon, and that's the Dalai Lama. So make sure you know who the Dalai Lama is, what his role is as a spiritual leader, and his connection then to Tibetan Buddhism, which is called Diamond Buddhism, and that is Vajrayana. Vajrayana Buddhism is Tibetan Buddhism, and it's the Diamond Way. So those are your sects of Mahayana, with the bulk of attention then given to Zen. Let me see if I had any other points then about this. Yeah, I would say, you have probably 6 or 7 questions on Zen itself. So that's about 10 to 12 pages of your reading. So make sure that you look closely at Zen Buddhism, because that'll be a substantial part of your quiz this time. And I think that's all I wanted to go over with you. Do you have any questions for me about either your reading for this week, your assignment this week, or going forward? Any questions out there? I see a few of you still tuned in here. Glad you're here. Any questions, folks? All right. I'm not seeing anything. So I'm going to say thanks for tuning in to this week's Periscope, and I'll be in touch with you over the next few days with your analysis response assignments, so be looking for those. Enjoy your reading. I think it's great, and I hope you continue to learn a lot from this and begin to, and as we move forward through the next chapter, that you'll start to begin to see connections as well as important points of difference. In fact, I want to close with this little thought. I had this thought last week and I forgot to mention it, so I'm going to mention it this week. One way to do these readings is to have this mindset of appreciation and charity, which is very important to have in order to really grasp what's at issue here. And one of the dangers of being sort of over charitable is that you would sort of gloss over important differences between religions. And it's really easy to see important connections between religions. In fact, your model that you're using to evaluate the different religions excuse me, is sort of predicated on the idea that there are really key elements that are common to all religions. And that's a really important point. But just because there are common elements to religions and that they are motivated by some of the same questions and same problems that human life and the human condition present us, that does not mean that they say the same thing or that all religions are the same. So be careful of claims like that, because if you sort of adopt that posture, it'll be really difficult then to notice what is distinct about particular religions in that desire. And I think it is a good-hearted desire in order to see what religions have in common, to be able to transcend the conflicts, to be able to have cross-religious, transcultural communication. Those are all good things. But that, in its own way, that's kind of offensive to religions, to be able to say that they're all the same, because it sort of eliminates the things that are distinctive to a particular people, to a particular place, and the particular answers that are given to what is common to all religions, at least so far as we've got our model to work with. Again, that ain't perfect, but it is something I think that can help you be able then to compare helpfully, what one religion says about the human predicament versus another and another and another, and you'll see strands of common thought and diagnosis appear in that. But just be careful of that further step that says, oh, all religions are the same. Okay, so I just wanted to mention that, and keep up the great work in your reading and your performance on the quizzes, and I will see you next week. Take care.